Okay, let me show you the third method for trenching out all this material for the first part of the half laps. On this one I used a track saw, on this one I used a router, and now we'll do this one. For the first two methods, we had these beams all clamped together so I could cut them all at once. But for this third one, I'm going to take them apart because you can only do a few at a time. And that's because we're going to be using the slide miter saw with this depth stop trenching feature. And the first thing you're going to want to do is mark halfway down your piece of wood, which marks the halfway point for your half laps. Then you'll move your piece of wood up against the fence and back behind the blade so that you can see where the blade will cut on your piece of wood. Then you'll come up here and you'll flip this green switch right here down, and that will create an adjustable stop that prevents your saw from going past a certain point. And then you'll lower the saw down and see how far the stopper is set. Here you can see I'm a little ways above the line that I want to be at. So now I'll go up to that green lever and I'll twist it to allow it to come down until I just meet up with that line. Now, if anything, you want to be a little bit above that line. It's always easier to come back and take a little bit off afterwards rather than cutting out past the line and messing everything up. The next thing you want to do, and this is very important, is get a scrap piece of wood that's roughly the same size as the piece you'll be cutting. And you're going to put it behind the piece of wood, and then you're going to put your piece of wood up against it before you start cutting. And the reason that's important is that if you see right here, when your blade comes down, you're going to want to push through to cut all that material out. But right here at the back, you'll see that the radius of the saw won't be able to cut out this section right here. And so by moving the whole thing forward, now your saw can travel all the way through on that even plane to cut out all the material. So you'll put your scrap piece in, then you can move your work piece over, and you're going to line it up on the line and make a whole bunch of cuts. Now I need to point out, when you go down with the saw, you see that it's going to stop right there and it can travel back and forth. You don't want to push down really hard on your saw. With almost every saw that I've used, if you push hard enough, you can make the saw flex, and that's going to change the depth that you're cutting at. So you kind of want to be even-handed about it. Let the saw come down, find that stop, and then just push through nice and easy. Don't press down really hard on the saw, which might change the height at which you're cutting. And one other thing to note is if your block is more or less the size of your workpiece, it will help prevent tear out at the back side when your saw is coming through and cutting through the back side of your workpiece. Now I'm going to start on this side. I'm going to do a really precise cut right down my cut line right here. Then I'm going to make my way all the way through. And when I get to the back side, I'm actually not going to go all the way up to that line. I'm going to go out and I'm going to test it. I'm going to see where my wood is at and then make the final cuts just to make it fit just right. Now you could go ahead and cut those all the way out instead of leaving these like this, just do way more passes. And a lot of the times I do, but I kind of like chipping them out and using the chisel. Okay, and now we can do a quick test fit to see how it works. I'm going to butt the piece of wood up against that first line that I cut, and then we'll see where it lies, or if it fits. You can see it almost fits, but there's just a tiny bit more to go. So now I can take it back to the saw and just barely take off a tiny bit, and then it should fit in. And now this is where you have to be very careful because it's very easy to take off too much. So one thing that I've done over the years to try and take off only a sliver amount and not too much is I'll bring the saw blade down and then I'll butt the workpiece up against it just barely. And it just kind of flexes the blade a tiny bit. And then listen when it comes up, it'll make a little twang. And then you're just over a tiny bit where you can see now that that blade is just barely going down on a sliver of the wood that you can cut out. Okay, and now we'll test again and see if we got it right or if we have to do that shave one more time. Okay, I'm very happy with that. That's a nice snug fit. So now in 3 different videos, I've showed you 3 different ways to do this cut. Once with the track saw, once with the router, and once with the slide miter saw, depending on which tool you have or which one you want to use.